The howling wind carried Elizabeth Fairchild's desperate cries into the vast Wyoming wilderness, but there wasn't a soul around to hear her pleas as the train disappeared into the distance, leaving her alone in the growing darkness of 1885. Rebecca Faulkner had never felt so utterly abandoned. The train that was supposed to carry her to a new life in Sacramento had left her behind at this desolate water stop after she'd stepped off briefly to stretch her legs. Her thin calico dress offered little protection against the bitter November chill as darkness descended across the plains. Her belongings, all she owned in the world, continued westward without her, along with any hope for the teaching position that awaited her arrival. The small water station stood empty, its lone occupant having departed hours earlier. Rebecca hugged herself tightly, her teeth chattering as she considered her options. The nearest town lay miles away, and night was falling rapidly. Panic rose in her chest as she realized her predicament alone, without supplies, in unforgiving territory where outlaws and wild animals roamed freely. As the temperature dropped further, Rebecca sought shelter beside the station building, curling against the wooden wall that offered minimal protection from the wind. Her thoughts drifted to the life she'd left behind in Boston, the funeral of her father, the mounting debts, and the cousin who had made it clear she was no longer welcome in the family home. The teaching position in Sacramento had been her last hope. "I won't die here," she whispered to herself, though her trembling body betrayed her determination. "I won't." Hours passed as Rebecca drifted between fitful sleep and alert terror. Every sound, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustling of brush in the wind, sent fresh waves of fear through her body. By midnight, her fingers had grown numb, and she could no longer feel her toes inside her impractical city boots. The first light of dawn brought no warmth, only the ability to see the vast emptiness surrounding her. Rebecca forced herself to stand on legs that threatened to buckle beneath her. She needed to find help, or she wouldn't survive another night. It was mid-morning when she heard it, the rhythmic beating of hooves against the hard earth. Rebecca stumbled toward the tracks, waving her arms frantically despite her weakness. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, gradually taking shape as he approached. Astride a chestnut stallion rode a man whose broad shoulders were draped in a worn leather coat, a dusty Stetson pulled low over his eyes. He reined his horse to a stop several yards away, studying her with cautious interest. "Please," Rebecca called, her voice cracking from thirst and cold. "The train left without me yesterday. I have nowhere to go." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. As he approached, Rebecca saw a face weathered by sun and hardship, yet handsome in its rugged way. His eyes, deep blue as a mountain lake, assessed her condition with concern. "Madam, you're half frozen," he said, his voice deep and tinged with a slight southern drawl. He removed his coat without hesitation and wrapped it around her shoulders. The residual warmth from his body enveloped her like an embrace. "Thank you," she managed, clutching the coat tightly. "I'm Rebecca Faulkner. I was traveling to Sacramento for a teaching position." "Kade Anderson," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "Ranch owner. My property's about 5 miles east of here." He studied her pale face and blue-tinged lips with growing concern. "You're in no condition to travel far. You need warmth and food." Rebecca swayed slightly, exhaustion and cold taking their toll. Kade's strong hands steadied her by the shoulders. "You were found cold by the tracks," he said, his voice softening. "Then come warm my world. My ranch isn't much, but it's shelter and safety until we can get you where you need to go." Under normal circumstances, Rebecca would have been appalled at the impropriety of accompanying a strange man to his home. But these were not normal circumstances, and her survival instinct overrode social convention. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," she said, dignity still evident despite her desperate state. Kade helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. His arms formed a protective circle around her as he took the reins, and Rebecca found herself leaning back against his chest, drawing from his strength and warmth. "Hold tight, Miss Faulkner," he said, urging his horse forward. "We'll have you warmed up soon enough." The journey to Kade's ranch passed in a blur for Rebecca. She drifted in and out of awareness, conscious only of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her and the solid presence of the man behind her. When they finally arrived at a modest but well-maintained ranch house, she was barely conscious. Kade carried her inside and placed her gently before the fireplace. He worked quickly to build a fire, then disappeared briefly, returning with blankets and a cup of hot coffee laced with whiskey. "Drink this," he instructed, holding the cup to her lips. "It'll warm you from the inside." The liquid burned a path down Rebecca's throat, spreading warmth through her chest. As feeling returned to her extremities, so did pain. She winced as her fingers and toes began to throb. "Easy now," Kade said, noticing her discomfort. "That's your blood flowing back. Good sign, means no frostbite." As Rebecca sipped the coffee, she took in her surroundings. The ranch house was simple but comfortable, with hand-crafted furniture and a few touches that spoke of care. A colorful quilt draped over a chair, shelves lined with books, dried wildflowers in a mason jar on the table. "You live here alone?" she asked, finding her voice again. "Just me and a couple of ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse," Kade replied. "They're good men, been with me since I started this place 4 years ago." Rebecca nodded, clutching the warm cup between her hands. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Anderson. You saved my life today, Kade," he corrected gently. "And no thanks needed. Couldn't leave a lady to freeze, especially one as—" He paused, seeming to catch himself. "One in such dire circumstances." A knock at the door preceded the entrance of an older woman with silver-streaked hair and a kind face. "Martha," Kade greeted her. "Glad you could come. This is Miss Faulkner. She was stranded at the water stop." Martha clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Poor dear. Let's get you proper care." She turned to Kade. "I'll need hot water and clean towels." While Kade busied himself with these tasks, Martha introduced herself as the wife of a neighboring rancher. "Kade sent one of his boys to fetch me," she explained. "Thought you might be more comfortable with a woman's help." Rebecca was touched by his consideration. Martha helped her out of her damp clothes and into a clean nightgown that Kade had retrieved from a trunk. "My sisters," he explained briefly before leaving the women alone. After a warm bath and a meal of hearty stew, Rebecca felt human again. Martha had insisted on staying the night, sleeping in the small guest room while Rebecca took Kade's bed despite her protests. Kade himself slept on a pallet by the fire. The next morning, Rebecca awoke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed in clothes Martha had brought, a simple skirt and blouse that were slightly large but clean and warm. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Kade at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes. "Good morning," he said, his face brightening at the sight of her. "You look much better today." "I feel much better, thanks to your kindness," Rebecca replied. She noticed that in the light of day, Kade Anderson was even more handsome than she had first realized. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and his jaw was strong and clean-shaven. Over breakfast, Rebecca explained her situation more fully: her father's death, the debts that had forced her to sell their home, and the teaching position that had offered her a chance at independence. "The school term starts in 2 weeks, she concluded. "I've missed the train, and even if I could afford another ticket, the next one doesn't come through for 10 days. By then, they'll have given the position to someone else." Cade considered this problem. "There's a telegraph office in town. We could send a wire explaining your circumstances. Schools are desperate for teachers out here. They might hold the position." Hope flickered in Rebecca's heart. "That would be wonderful." "In the meantime," Cade continued, "you're welcome to stay here. Martha can visit daily if that would make you more comfortable." Rebecca hesitated. "I couldn't impose. Perhaps there's a boarding house in town." Cade shook his head. "Nearest town's Whitridge, 15 miles away. Small place, no boarding house to speak of. The saloon has rooms, but—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. "I understand," Rebecca said quickly, "but I must insist on earning my keep. I can cook, clean, mend, whatever would be useful." A smile played at the corners of Cade's mouth. "Well, my cooking's passable at best. The men would appreciate a woman's touch in the kitchen." And so it was arranged. Martha would bring more suitable clothing for Rebecca, and Cade would take her to town the next day to send a telegraph. In the meantime, she would help with household duties. That afternoon, after Martha had departed with promises to return the following day, Rebecca explored the ranch house more thoroughly. The bookshelf caught her attention. Volumes of Shakespeare nestled alongside practical guides to animal husbandry and farming techniques. "You're a reader," she commented when Cade returned from checking his livestock. He seemed almost embarrassed. "My mother was a school teacher. She believed education was as important as knowing how to ride and shoot." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Cade said softly. "Lost her to typhoid 6 years ago. Pa followed a year later. His heart, the doctor said, but I think it was grief." Rebecca understood that kind of loss all too well. "I'm sorry. My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me after that." A moment of shared understanding passed between them. Then Cade cleared his throat. "I should check on the horses. Feel free to borrow any books that interest you." The next day, they rode to Whitridge together. The town was indeed small, a single street lined with basic establishments: general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a small church. The telegraph office was attached to the general store. While Cade purchased supplies, Rebecca composed a message to the school board in Sacramento, explaining her predicament and asking if they would hold the position. The response came back within hours. The position had already been filled upon her failure to arrive. Disappointment crashed over Rebecca as she read the words. Her one chance at security gone. "Bad news?" Cade asked gently, finding her sitting dejectedly outside the store. Rebecca handed him the reply. "They couldn't wait. I don't blame them. Children need a teacher. But now I don't know what I'll do." Cade read the telegram, his brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, Rebecca." It was the first time he had used her given name, and despite her distress, she found she liked the sound of it on his lips. "Whitridge could use a teacher," he said suddenly. "The children here either go without schooling or travel 20 miles to the next town. Folks have been talking about establishing a school for years." Rebecca looked up, hope rekindling. "Do you think they would hire me?" "Only one way to find out," Cade replied with a smile. "The town council meets at the church tonight. We can put it to them then." That evening, Rebecca found herself standing before Whitridge's most prominent citizens, explaining her qualifications and her vision for a school. The response was enthusiastic, though practical concerns were raised about where classes would be held and how a teacher's salary would be funded. "The old Miller place at the edge of town has been empty for years," suggested the blacksmith. "Needs work, but it could serve as both schoolhouse and living quarters." "As for salary," Cade spoke up, "I'll contribute $10 monthly. I expect other ranchers would do the same for the education of the area's children." By the meeting's end, Rebecca had been hired as Whitridge's first schoolteacher, with classes to begin as soon as the Miller house could be made habitable approximately 2 weeks. "You've given me a new start," Rebecca told Kade as they rode back to his ranch under a star-filled sky. "I don't know how to thank you. Seeing you smile is thanks enough," he replied, then quickly added, "and knowing the local children will finally get proper schooling, of course." The following days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Rebecca helped with household tasks while Kade and his men worked the ranch. In the evenings, they often sat by the fire, discussing books or sharing stories from their lives. Rebecca found herself drawn to Kade's intelligence, his quiet strength, and his unexpected gentleness. The weekend brought a community effort to restore the Miller house. Men from all over the area arrived with tools and materials, while women brought food and helped clean the long-abandoned building. Rebecca worked alongside them, scrubbing floors and washing windows, her heart full at the community's generosity. Kade seemed to be everywhere at once, replacing broken boards on the porch, fixing the roof, constructing simple desks and benches for what would become the classroom. Several times, Rebecca caught him watching her, his expression unreadable. As evening approached and the volunteers began to depart, Rebecca found herself alone with Kade in what would become her new home. The building was transformed clean, solid, and welcoming. "It's perfect," she said, turning in a circle to take in the simple but comfortable space. "I never expected such kindness from strangers." "That's the way of things out here," Kade explained. "People help each other. They have to survive." He hesitated, then added, "I've asked Martha to help you settle in when you're ready to move, and I've ordered some books for your school from Denver. They should arrive next week." Rebecca was touched by his thoughtfulness. "You've done so much for me already." "I wish I could do more," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Kade cleared his throat and looked away. "We should head back. It'll be dark soon." As they rode home, Rebecca found herself wondering about the life she might build in Whiteridge and whether Kade Anderson might be part of it. The following week passed quickly as preparations for the school continued. Word spread through the surrounding area, and by the time Rebecca was ready to move into the Miller house, she had 17 prospective students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. The day before she was to leave Kade's ranch, Rebecca felt a strange reluctance. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to their evening conversations, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The thought of no longer seeing him daily left an unexpected emptiness in her heart. That evening after dinner, Kade suggested a walk. The air was cool but pleasant, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. They strolled in companionable silence until reaching a small rise that overlooked the ranch. "I wanted to show you this," Kade said, gesturing toward the view. "It's my favorite spot." From this vantage point, Rebecca could see the entire ranch spread before her, the house with lamplight glowing from its windows, the barn and corrals, the grazing cattle in the distance. Beyond stretched the vast Wyoming landscape, beautiful in its rugged simplicity. "It's breathtaking," she said honestly. "I came out here when I first bought this land," Kade told her. "It was nothing then, just empty space and possibility. I stood right here and promised myself I'd build something worthwhile." "You have," Rebecca assured him. "This is a wonderful home you've created." Kade turned to face her, his expression serious. "It's missing something important, though." "What's that?" He took a deep breath. "A family, someone to share it with." Rebecca's heart quickened. "Kade, I know it's sudden," he said quickly. "We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but something tells me that if I let you walk away tomorrow without speaking my mind, I'll regret it for the rest of my days." He took her hands in his. "I've never met anyone like you, Rebecca." Your strength, your kindness, your determination, you've brought something to my life I didn't even know was missing. I'm not asking for promises now, just a chance. A chance to court you properly, to see if what I'm feeling might be returned." Rebecca looked into his earnest blue eyes and knew with sudden clarity that she didn't want to leave this ranch, this man. The connection between them, formed in the crucible of her desperate need and his generous response, had deepened into something profound. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Joy spread across Kade's face. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise of feelings yet to be fully explored. When they returned to the house, they made plans. Rebecca would still move to the Miller house, propriety demanded it, and she was committed to teaching. But Kade would call on her regularly, and she would visit the ranch on weekends. The next morning, Kade drove Rebecca to her new home in his wagon, her few possessions and gifts from the community bedding, kitchenware, clothing packed carefully in the back. As they approached the Miller house, Rebecca was surprised to see several people waiting. "Final touches," Kade explained with a smile. Inside, Rebecca found the women of Whiteridge had brought small comforts, curtains for the windows, a braided rug for the floor, preserved foods for her pantry. The thoughtfulness brought tears to her eyes. As the first day of school approached, Rebecca threw herself into preparations. She organized her students by age and ability, planned lessons, and arranged the classroom space. Kade visited nearly every evening, sometimes bringing small gifts, a wildflower bouquet, a jar of honey from a neighbor's bees, books for her growing school library. On the eve of her first day of teaching, he arrived with a special delivery, a large bell mounted on a post. "Every proper school needs a bell," he said, as he and his ranch hands installed it beside the front door. Rebecca's first day as Whiteridge's teacher was both challenging and rewarding. Her students were eager but at widely varying levels of education. Some could barely recognize their letters, while others had been taught the basics by parents or older siblings. By day's end, she was exhausted but exhilarated. As the children departed, Rebecca heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Kade rode up, his smile as warming as the afternoon sun. "How was your first day, Miss Faulkner?" he asked formally, mindful of the few lingering parents. "Wonderful and exhausting, Mr. Anderson," she replied with equal formality, though her eyes conveyed a more personal message. After the last family had gone, Kade dismounted and approached her. "I brought something to celebrate the occasion," he said, producing a small package from his saddlebag. Inside, Rebecca found a beautiful fountain pen. "For marking papers and writing letters," Kade explained. "Though I hope you won't need to write many letters since I plan to be right here." Rebecca's courtship with Kade blossomed throughout the fall. They attended church together on Sundays, rode across his land on Saturday afternoons, and shared quiet evenings by her fire or his. The community observed their growing relationship with approval. Kade was respected, and Rebecca had quickly earned affection through her dedication to their children. As winter approached, Kade began making more frequent references to the future. He spoke of improvements to the ranch house, additions he was considering that would make it more comfortable for a family. He asked her opinion on furniture, on gardens, on the possibility of adding a second story. Rebecca understood what remained unsaid. She found herself imagining a life at his side, not just as his wife but as his partner in building something lasting and meaningful. The teaching position that had once seemed her salvation now felt like a stepping stone to something even more fulfilling. The first snow fell in late November, coinciding with Thanksgiving. The entire community gathered at the church for a shared feast. Rebecca sat beside Cade, acutely aware of his presence, of the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. After the meal, as people mingled and children played, Cade drew Rebecca outside. Snow was falling gently, transforming the town into a winter wonderland. "I have something important to ask you," he said, suddenly serious. Rebecca's heart leaped. "Yes." Instead of speaking, Cade reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. He opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single pearl. Kneeling in the fresh snow, he looked up at her with love shining in his eyes. "Rebecca Faulkner, you came into my life unexpected as a summer storm and twice as transformative. I found you cold by the tracks, and you've warmed my world in ways I never imagined possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy surged through Rebecca's heart. "Yes, Cade. Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of their future together. When they returned to the church, their news was met with cheers and congratulations. Plans were immediately suggested: a Christmas wedding, perhaps, or waiting until spring when travel would be easier for guests. "Christmas," Rebecca decided, looking to Cade for agreement. "I don't want to wait for spring." "Christmas it is," he confirmed, squeezing her hand. The weeks leading to their wedding were a flurry of preparations. Rebecca continued teaching, unwilling to abandon her students mid-term, but made arrangements with a young woman from a neighboring town to take over after the holiday break. Martha and other women helped Rebecca prepare her trousseau, while Cade worked with his men to add a second bedroom to the ranch house, "for the family we hope to have," he explained, his eyes full of promise. Their wedding day dawned clear and cold, the landscape a pristine white canvas under a bright blue sky. The small church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries, candles providing both light and warmth. Rebecca wore a dress of ivory silk, a gift from the women of Whitridge, who had pooled resources to order it from Denver. As she walked down the aisle to where Cade waited, handsome in a new suit, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 2 months ago, she had been abandoned and freezing, her future uncertain. Now she moved toward a man and a life chosen not from desperation but from love, surrounded by a community that had embraced her as their own. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows and rings, promising to love and support each other through all that life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cade's kiss held both tenderness and passion, a fitting beginning to their marriage. The celebration afterward was joyous, with music and dancing continuing into the evening. Finally, as stars appeared in the winter sky, Cade and Rebecca departed for the ranch, their home now together. Spring brought new beginnings. The land awakened from winter's embrace, and wildflowers dotted the prairie. Rebecca planted a garden beside the ranch house, while Cade's cattle herd expanded with the birth of new calves. Their life together settled into a rhythm of shared work and quiet evenings, occasional visits to town and Sunday services at the church. Rebecca continued to help at the school 1 day a week, unwilling to completely abandon her teaching vocation. On a warm evening in early summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rebecca turned to her husband with a smile that held a secret. "I've been thinking," she said casually, "that we might need to expand the house again." Cade looked puzzled. "Are you expecting visitors?" "Just one," Rebecca replied, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "But not for several months yet." Understanding dawned in Cade's eyes, followed by wonder and joy. He gathered her into his arms, his face alight with happiness. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." Their child, a daughter they named Catherine Martha, was born the following winter, bringing new light and purpose to their lives. As Rebecca cradled her infant while Kade looked on with pride and devotion, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her here. From that desperate day when she had been found cold by the tracks, to this moment of perfect contentment, her path had been unexpected but ultimately blessed. Kade had indeed brought warmth to her world, and together they had created something beautiful: a family, a home, a life filled with love. As the years passed, their family and ranch prospered. 2 more children joined Catherine, a son named after Kade's father, and another daughter with Rebecca's mother's name. The Anderson Ranch became known throughout the territory for its fine cattle and generous hospitality. Rebecca never forgot her beginnings in Whiteridge, nor the community that had welcomed her so warmly. She maintained her connection to the school, eventually serving on its board and helping to build a proper schoolhouse when the town grew large enough to support one. Sometimes, on clear evenings, she and Kade would walk to the rise overlooking their property, the spot where he had first spoken of his feelings. There, with their home spread before them and their children playing nearby, they would stand together in quiet appreciation of all they had built and found together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Kade would sometimes ask. "That day when I found you by the tracks?" And Rebecca would smile, remembering her desperation and his kindness, the journey from strangers to beloved partners. "No," she would answer honestly, "but I'm grateful every day that the train left without me." In those moments, with her hand in his and their future stretching bright before them, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just shelter from the cold, but the very heart of warmth itself in this land, in this life, and in the steadfast love of the cowboy who had invited her to warm his world.